This is Peter Walsh with M&R.
Scott Ritter with the Decorated Apparel Expo.
This is Ben Landesman with Lawson Screen and Digital Products.
This is Deborah Sexton.
And you're listening to the Two Regular Guys
Podcast.
Hosted by Terry Combs
and Aaron Montgomery.
All right. Well, welcome to the show. It is Friday, May 28th, 2021. I'm Terry Combs. You can find me at terrycombs.com.
And I am Eric Campbell, sitting in for Aaron Montgomery, and you can find me at ericccampbell.com. But today, we're going to welcome in Chris Debian. Hopefully I said that right. He was nice enough to provide us with pronunciation, which Aaron's usually the one who gets to mess up the names. If I did it, it's my turn. But Chris is with Ergosoft, and he's going to talk with us about RIP software for your production floor printers. So that should be really cool to talk about. I mean, we've been wanting to do something on RIP for some time, so great to have Chris in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Before we do that, though, why don't we go ahead and check out some news?
All right. Well, I guess this is sort of news on my part. I wanted to give a little update on my in-person class I did at Atlas Screen Supply in Chicago last weekend, because I reported the week before about people coming out to the Graphics Pro Expo in Irving, Texas. So here was the scenario with this class, and just a couple of days before it, there were some changes in the CDC guidelines. So the folks at Atlas reached out to everybody attending and said, we're following CDC guidelines. If you have been vaccinated, we're not going to require you to wear a mask, and we're not going to ask to see your little card that apparently they're all over the internet anyway. But here's the interesting part. Some people came in without masks on at all. Some people came on wearing masks. But within probably 15 minutes of people arriving before the class started, only one person remained in a mask for the entire time, and everybody else was mask free. So, and something else, and we were talking, Eric, you and myself and Chris before the show started about trade shows and people coming out, and we had maybe 30% of the class were from far away, Alabama, Tennessee. So people are out there looking for the opportunity to get to these in-person events, I think. And I've heard that from the trade show folks as well, as they're getting a lot more people from outside the region, because most of these shows, other than Printing United and the ISS or Impressions Expo Long Beach, those are national shows, but all these other shows are regional. But people are coming in from all over the place. They want to get in front of the equipment. They want to get in front of people. So I think the opening up is starting as a trickle, and then it's going to be a waterfall. I think within a month, I think it's going to be opening up, and people are going to be okay. We're good to go.
I have to say, I think so too. Personally, I just got done signing contracts for going out on the road, and I actually last week on the Take Up did an episode about why those of us who are going to go out on the road are doing it, and what we kind of expect to give people who are coming to the trade shows. And I'm going to say it was flooded. Most of my comments were about people saying these are the ones that I'm going to. And like I said, there's still plenty of reason, plenty of people who are feeling like they're not really ready to go out yet. And that, by all means, I respect everybody's decisions on that. I will say that the interest is there, and people are really scrambling to make it happen. The showrunners who are out there have been really working hard to make sure that they can present something once it comes time. So, I'm excited to see what happens with it. Sure, a little weird, a little nervous to see how it turns out. It feels strange. I feel like it's kind of like getting out on the sea and you don't have your sea legs again yet. Booking travel and get ready for this stuff, getting ready to present. But, I know there's some things that just kind of don't come out of online education the same way that you get from the live stuff. I think there's a place for both. And what I'm really hoping for, and what most of my listeners said, is that they really want to see the hybrid model become permanent. And I think that now that everybody's set up to do it, it's very likely that can happen again. So, good to hear about that. And kind of interesting to hear all the people traveling.
Yeah, exactly right. So how about you? Do you have a news item?
No, yeah, I do have one news item. It feels a little self-serving, but I will say our good friend Aaron Montgomery put this into the slot for me to say. Tomorrow morning, a Decorators Community hosted by two regular guys is going to have me teaching my online class about understanding emblems, so digitizing production styles and the sales of patches. And essentially, I'll be teaching more about digitizing for emblems, including some small detail tips, creating your own borders, execution for smaller end patches, like the different methods by which you sew them on your existing equipment without adding more specialty equipment to your shop. And we're going to cover things like the way it fits into your market and how to sell and market patches. So that's all happening tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. You can find more at decorators.education. So I'll go ahead and throw that into the comments for everybody, but you can go ahead and check that out there. If you still want to sign up, there is still time to sign up for the class tomorrow morning.
All right, very good. I have one more thing, Eric. Printing United Alliance, formerly SGIA for most of us, has announced that registration has officially opened for Printing United 2021. It is going to be at the Orange County Convention Center in Orlando, October 6th through 8th, which is a Wednesday through Friday, as I recall. New this year is a 3-phase expo experience with which further provides access to even more education, new product debuts, and more for the industry around the globe. And also, the two regular guys, we have a 10 by 20 booth.
There you go.
I know, and we'll be broadcasting live each day from the show, plus doing as many interviews as we can. So anybody that's going to be in Orlando, and before you rush through the show, then head over to Disney, stop by and say hello at the two regular guys booth.
Well worth it. And while we're saying hello to everybody, let's go ahead and say hello to some of the folks in the comments who are listening live. First, we have Todd Downing, of course, of OSG fame, as we know. Todd's in this morning. Cindy King out in Texas. Good morning, Cindy. Happy to see you here. Yeah, Gösta out in Sweden. Happy to see you too. Anthony says hello. We have Richard in. Rich is in, saying hi. And we have David Gross joining us as well. Thank you for tuning in. So great to have everybody listening, and very happy that you got here just in time for the thing that everybody's waiting for. I mean, we all know that the dad joke. It's got to be time for the dad joke.
Do you think Todd's here because Aaron said, "Hey, I'm not going to be there. Would you watch those guys?"
If he's not, he probably should be.
All right, here's my dad joke. You ready?
Yes, I'm ready for it.
All right, Eric. Did you know that Aaron gave me the nickname Mr. Compromise?
No, I really didn't know anything about that.
Yeah, it wasn't my first choice, but I guess I'm okay with it.
All right, I like this one. This is what I'm not always into the super pun ones, but this one I like. Sneaks up on you a little bit. It's the style that I prefer. So I got to say, dad joke, well executed, sir.
Appreciate it. All right. Eric, before we dive in, we want to thank everybody for checking out the Two Regular Guys podcast. We are always looking for new guests. If you or anyone you know would like to join us on the show, go to calendly.com/2 regular guys, and give us your show ideas. If you are listening to the podcast version of the show, we would appreciate you sharing the Two Regular Guys with your industry friends so they can become regulators too. And we would love and appreciate you giving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Podcasts, or wherever you go for your podcast listening. And if you're watching us live right now, please join in with your comments and questions. Chris would be happy to answer your question about RIP software, and reach out to your industry friends to have them join us today as well.
All right. So yeah, we are everywhere. Everywhere you want to be, we are there podcasting. But anyway, with that, let's go ahead and hear a word from our success group before we get on to the interview.
Are you struggling to get your arms around your overhead? Does pricing your products and knowing how much it costs to make something keep you up at night? Do you dread large orders because you have no workflow or process? Are customers a one-and-done drain on your growing business? Is getting new customers and dealing with marketing a challenge? Welcome to the OSG Squad. Become a member of our success group and make the investment to build on a foundation that will lead you to success. We exist to support small businesses in the decorators community with foundational resources like calculating overhead, pricing for profit, business planning, and marketing basics. Plus, we add in the proper mindset so you can believe in yourself and charge what you're worth. We help with setting goals you will achieve and give you success principles to build upon. Our monthly or annual membership experience provides bi-weekly live training. You also get access to all past training videos we've done since our inception in January of 2020. Members also have a private Facebook group that we describe as a brainstorming group without all the Facebook drama. For more information and to get some free resources so you can see what OSG is all about, go to oursuccessgroup.com/empowered. Again, oursuccessgroup.com/empowered. We can't wait to be in the OSG community with you.
All right. Glad to hear from OSG and from Aaron, who's currently out, but should be back here soon. So have to put
remember when we all got together and did that whistling background? That was, I think we did.
That was so much fun, you know. After the shows, walking through the aisles, whistling, as you know.
Okay, listeners, we didn't really do that.
We didn't, no. That's just stock. It's fine. I have a couple more comments I want to grab before we get into the interview. First, I'm going to say hello to Jane, one of my favorite embroiderers out in Houston. Howdy from Houston. Howdy, Jane. Dale saying, great to see you traveling. So yeah, like I said, we're back out there, and a lot of folks are. We'll have to see how it turns out, but you'll hear it here first for sure. And also an answer to the dad joke from Todd Downing. Welp, now I'm hungry for a sandwich because it's a compromise. Meat in the middle. God. You don't even get the rib shop for that, Todd. All right. With that, let's get to the actual meat of this show, and let's talk to Chris. So Chris Devienne has been working for Ergosoft for the better part of 5 years, and as the business unit manager at Ergosoft, Chris has enjoyed helping Ergosoft grow and meet the needs of customers across a wide range of industries. With that, let's bring in Chris. Hey, Chris.
Hello. Good morning, guys.
Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, Chris, let's start at the very, very beginning. Explain to our listeners just what the heck RIP software is.
Okay. Well, the word demystifying, I think, is a pretty critical piece. So to begin, for anybody outside the industry, I'm going to say right now, it doesn't stand for rest in peace software. I can't tell you how many times I get that one from somebody outside the industry that's saying, "What is that? That's a little unfortunate that you work with RIP software." Okay, not to worry. Anybody
someone has to do it
involved in digital print, you know. So, so its name kind of signifies a little bit about what RIP software does, but I think modern day RIP software is just a lot more complex and versatile than kind of what it started out as. Mm-hmm. So I look at RIP software kind of as a translating tool for the most part. It's a piece of software that's basically going to do two main things. When you look at like, why do I need RIP software or what does it do? Think about it like a translator for color. So RIP software is going to take the building blocks of color and how we see color in the design space or how we see color in the real world, like, you know, a cheerleader's uniform or a football jersey. And it's going to translate that color into the building blocks of color in digital print, which is CMYK. And then sometimes they use other colors, but you know, for the most part, you're taking color that's in one language and you're translating it into another language. So that's the first part of what RIP software does. And I think the other part that it's come to do more and more over time is workflow. So the other piece of the RIP where it comes in is it's going to, if it's you know configured correctly and the bells and whistles are there, it's going to make your life a little bit easier for production. It's going to help you lay out jobs more efficiently and get work done in a way that's a little bit, you know, substantially better in some cases than how you were doing it before, how it could be done without RIP software. So you're looking at things like taking monotonous or repetitive tasks or complex tasks and simplifying them down to, in some cases, a selection on a drop-down menu. So on the color side, I think, you know, one interesting way of looking at it, aside from the conversion, is that basically you're taking a file and you're changing that file into a big map of ink dots. Yeah. Really, at the most fundamental level, it's and some of these jobs can be anywhere from, you know, let's say 24 inches long to 10 feet wide. And the printer needs that data to say, all right, well, I put a dot here and don't put a dot here, and a large one here of this color and that color. And, at that very microscopic level, you emerge with this big picture. So that's one thing that's really cool about RIP software is it's really kind of taking a giant image in some cases and breaking it down to the most fundamental level.
That is useful to get, like the roundup. I'll say, as the embroidery guy, I've used RIP software a little, not that much. So it's good to have that kind of general concept of what it is. So when we're going to do our digital printing, it's taking that image that we have in our software and then making it into that fundamental language for printers.
That's right. And why is that important? I mean, I think the other thing that's pretty critical is RIP software is basically going to enable you to achieve the consistent output over the course of time. So, when you're running a shop, you want to make sure that that customer that orders today, next week, and next month, and next year gets the same color and the same quality product every time they order. Mm-hmm. And that's another kind of fundamental piece that RIP software delivers is essentially it's going to provide you with that tool to ensure that the output is consistent. And if you do experience some drift, then you have the tools to adjust it back to that originally calibrated state. So that's
so color management as well as just that handling of the translation layer all within RIP. And then, as you say, with bells and whistles, also kind of that workflow of printing. All right.
Yeah. I think that piece has really kind of evolved over time. I don't think that it started out as being so heavily involved, but for example, now you have cutting features incorporated into the RIP so that you can drive your cutter after you make the print, especially for I'm sure a lot of embroiderers run into similar kinds of garments, sportswear and that kind of thing. There's a lot of cutting and sewing that goes on after, the digital print process. And some of those pieces have been incorporated back into the RIP. So I think as time has progressed, it's kind of grown in terms of what it could do. Different parts of the production process have hooks into the software now. So, begins to kind of grow and evolve as the production environment gets, more complex.
Yeah. So kind of on that topic, of growing beyond maybe just that initial translation layer. I mean, I know it's a big question, but why don't you talk to us a little bit about the RIP options that Ergosoft offers kind of to the garment and the product decorating industry in general?
Sure. Yeah. So over the course of time, Ergosoft kind of globally has become known as the kind of the premier solution for dye sublimation. Mm-hmm. So for the most part, when we look at what the needs are, and there's really nothing in the RIP that limits us to being good at dye sublimation. But let's take a look at just what some of the main applications are within not just sublimation printing, let's say direct to fabric as well. You have your garments and apparel, you have your digital textile, and you have your trinkets and memorabilia and that kind of thing. So within garments and apparel, there's a few really specific options that make your life easier as you're making stuff over the course of the day. So for example, things like seam extension. When you print out a piece on the fabric, you might experience some shrinkage depending on how that fabric's made. So then you can extend the image a certain amount to account for the loss that you get as that material is cut and you need to put two seams together and sew it. You lose a little bit of that material. So having a seam extension tool allows you to ensure that the size is going to be accurate after it's cut. Another thing in terms of layout, we have a really neat feature called true shape nesting. Now, when you're talking about garments, you have a bunch of irregular shapes. Now, try to put all those crazy shapes together to get the most efficient use of your media. You'll pull your hair out. You'll go crazy. So that's a really nice tool that automates your layout process when you're talking about pants and jerseys and shirts that are comprised of, I don't think a lot of people understand or know that your average shirt consists of 4, 5, 6 different pieces, and they're all very irregular. So one thing that makes Ergosoft a nice choice is that you can pull in your files, and then you can multiply them right in the job composer. I want 5 of these, 5 of these, 5 of those. Suddenly you have 5 jerseys off of one file. And then there's an algorithm built into the program that's going to determine the best way for everything to fit together. So you click a button, it nests it, and then you're good to go.
Is that the Tetris button?
Yeah, exactly.
No, having done a lot of sign vinyl and applique, I will attest to the fact that nesting software is very useful and beats the heck out of playing your own game of Illustrator Tetris for sure.
Yeah. Not as fun as the real Tetris.
All right. Well, so Chris, at what point do I decide to go from the factory provided software and move toward a third party RIP software?
Sure, that's a great question. I think another piece that to just kind of as a continuation of an answer to the last question that will also help to answer this. Another piece that Eric mentioned is color management. Right. Mm-hmm. So what is color management? Why is it needed? So if we're looking at, I'm making sports jerseys or, licensed apparel, or I just have a customer that says, hey, make this. You want to be able to make that color, So really over the course of time, I think everyone from somebody shopping on Amazon to people running large factories that are doing big purchases and making licensed sportswear, they expect that color to be right. And that's another pretty big piece of what RIPs can do. I think that, we are really, really strong in color management. So when you're talking about licensed sportswear and team apparel, which is a great example of when color matters. It's an extension of brand. You hear the term brand colors pretty frequently. And ultimately that color is like the identity of a company. So you have to be spot on. So a lot of the times, if you're doing a lot of those colors and you're trying to manage a lot of work that has specific color values, you need a way to keep that all straight, because you're getting artwork from different places. If you're not doing your own, you have 10 different customers and artwork coming in from 10 different places, which could be color values coming from, in 10 different ways. So one of the first things I think that drives people to look for a software that's different than what's out of the box is, I need to get this color situation under control. I want to be able to print, Alabama Crimson Tide maroon and LA Lakers gold. And I have no idea how to get there, or they can get there and it takes forever to get to that color match. So, being able to match color, being able to manage color libraries. A lot of companies have their own color libraries. Everything they make is out of this list of 20 colors. So if you have a tool that allows you to say, hey, I can take the colors that you design with, and I can make sure that what those colors translate to. When we print it on our machine, here's what it looks like. That's the first thing. And the second thing is workflow. So as you begin to take more work in and the jobs get more complex, a lot of the times what happens is you run into an issue that the volume of your work or the complexity of your work has driven you to a point where it's either such an inefficient process that it doesn't make sense anymore, or there are challenges that you have that you can't solve with the piece of software that you have. Mm-hmm. So that's when you begin to say, all right, well, it's almost like a lot of companies get essentially forced into looking for something, right? Because they find an issue that's a product of that increased activity or complexity, or sometimes new customers can just create it with one huge job, and then all of a sudden you have a really big problem on your hands. And it's a good problem to have, as the saying goes. But it's very frequently something that's related to change.
Oh yeah. Well, and I'll certainly attest to the fact that it doesn't have to be team sports. Even small brands these days have brand style guides. I know a friend of the show, Jay Bissell, taught us all about style guides before. We've got some good episodes on that.
Right.
But when you're dealing with style guides, invariably somebody's coming to you with a Pantone color. Invariably, they're coming to you with a very distinct color library. And if you can't manage that correctly, trust me, that second print, the second run, that fill-in run, that second event that you do, that sudden fill-in will come back and bite you, and you'll get returns for sure. So that's a big deal. And let alone we talk about process and efficiency all the time. So hearing that workflow also is a part of it, of course, makes perfect sense, because it's always an issue that you have something that you do over and over. It seems like it's no big deal on your slow volume just to keep on doing this, manual process and tweaking and messing around. But having repeatable options that you can just do on the fly, you need that desperately. Awesome to kind of bring that up. I know there's usually people have issues with that, but
I wanted to jump in and say Todd says he just wants to print gray. But along those lines, if anybody has any of the regulators have questions for Chris, pop them up there in the chat, and we'll be happy to quiz Chris on whatever you guys have questions about.
And I can't let go that co-host that I am keeping up for, Aaron Montgomery, can't leave this alone because he wanted to learn from Chris so bad. Aaron's in the comments now. Couldn't be here, but he's still listening in. Excited to learn from Chris, and also says he loves nesting features in a RIP, worth the price of admission on a RIP. And that's funny because it's not the primary function of a RIP. But boy, if you need nesting features for cutting or for using media, that is a big deal. And last one here. Reproducing color and sublimation is always a challenge due to the variables. So that's something to think about. We're talking about efficiency, we're talking about process. Whatever you can take out of that process to make it easier to get to your color, to get to your final process, is going to be useful and going to be worthwhile. Every time somebody says like, "Oh, why am I buying something extra? Why am I purchasing something?" I'm like, look at your cost over life of this item. Look at the cost over the time you spend on your customers. Or let's say you've got a customer, digital printing invites all of these individual customized pieces coming in.
Yeah.
You need to manage all of those. So it's like, it will only multiply when you're doing digital, when you're doing sub, because it's going to be more of that kind of work. Absolutely. But in that case, let's talk more about kind of the software side of this. If someone is looking for third-party RIP, what are the check boxes they should be looking for comparing one RIP to another? And when you're looking side to side, what is it that's going to make the difference for you?
That's a good question. I think the biggest thing is when you're looking for a RIP, engage whatever company you're interested in. You have your list of 3 or 4 that you're looking to evaluate. Really, the software should be able to fill the needs of your production. First and foremost, essentially, there's a lot of similarities across the different RIP options, but there are some differences. So, the way that color is handled, or workflow features, or even something like the true shape nesting option is something that not all RIP softwares offer, and that's probably common in a few other small features across the board. So I think when you're looking at, where do I start? Ultimately, take a look at your workflow, at your process. And a good company will engage you and ask questions about where are your pain points now? What are your core needs? What are your wish list items? If you can do things differently, what would you be able to do differently? A lot of the times, companies don't even know they can do something differently. And they're not even aware of the tools that might be out there that are offered. So I think first and foremost, take a look at how you're doing it now and think about how you want to do it. And then that will probably help you ask questions of the RIP software company and say, hey, can you do you have a good way to handle spot colors?
Yeah.
Do you have a profiling engine integrated into your software? Do you have any nesting tools? Do you have, what kind of additional features are part of your hot folder module? Now, sometimes you're not going to know what questions to ask because you don't know what you don't know. But if you take a hard look at how you're doing things and think about how you might want to do them, a lot of times this stuff will come out in conversation. So a good company will be able to guide you in the direction of like, here's kind of what you need, and here's some options that you can consider based on where you want to get to. So you always have that compromise between like, this is a have to have, I need to have this, which at its core is, you want to have a tool that is going to help make life easier. So that tool, if you have an opportunity to evaluate, you want to make sure it's reasonably intuitive, that it's something that you're going to be able to, train your people on. I think that's one thing that's nice about Ergosoft is that our product is super intuitive, and once it's set up, it's very easy, dangerously easy. Now, the configuration isn't necessarily easy, but it's something that people have to use every day. And the challenge that a lot of people have as a business owner is, that your people on the floor are not necessarily the most well-trained or the highest paid. And so you have the challenge of you need to bring people up to speed, and you have to give them a tool that's powerful, and you have to give them a tool that's going to make your company better, but it also has to be usable. So that's one thing that we've seen a lot with the pandemic is that, there's been a lot of departure of talent as a product of the pandemic. And there's a lot of the people that know the most are no longer there. And so there's a lot of this process of kind of relearning and retooling that a lot of shops are going through. That's actually caused them to, circling back to the initial question, that's caused them to have to ask some of those questions like, what are we using for RIP software on the floor, and why are we using this, and how does it help us? How it helps you is probably the first place to start.
So it's definitely a question of where are your pain points, and also just knowing your process, right? I think that, and that's with most of the time you're adding equipment, you're adding software. It's usually about that kind of, all right, I see that I've got some pain points, or I know there's some things I have to do, and then very much the concept of being able to automate things that are fine to automate. I mean, when we talk about automation, I know in the embroidery world, a lot of automation is kind of a dirty word because it doesn't produce a better result. Usually you need more manual input. But I know for printing, it's like dealing with the art staff I've dealt with in multi-decoration houses. Yes, can they do a bunch of tweaks and make something work? Yes, but now we have the art staff doing all this production work when they could be doing art. Like, they're not doing creative anymore. They're in the back end messing around with, separations, messing around with color settings when they probably could have had a setup profile that just handled that. And I think that's worthwhile to think of, is who's spending time on what, and what could they be spending their time on? That's always a question that I think all production has to deal with.
That's a great point. Yeah. And it's interesting you mentioned that, because we have a tool for separations, for colorways, primarily for raster images. So let's say you're designing using TIFF files.
Sure.
You can actually set the colorways up in the RIP.
Oh, wow.
So the idea there is, let's take some of the burden away from the art department and empower the operator a little bit to say, hey, look, based on our color library, you give me one file in grayscale in what colors you want, and I can kick out 5 different versions of this thing using our colors, just with the tool. So, but you're very right in terms of like the term automation. That's like the holy grail of printing right now. It's like, how can we automate? And that's the biggest challenge that we see, is because you have all these different points of intersection, all these different inputs kind of coming together in one spot. And ultimately it's got to not just come out of the printer, but it's got to go through the rest of the process and then out the door. And that's what makes it difficult.
Chris, and you said something interesting when you said, and people have left and management's going, well, what does this do for me? How does this help me? There's nothing wrong with that. I think that we talk about that sometimes we have to go and reassess what it is that we have working for us, and are we using it completely? Are we using all the features that are available to us?
Absolutely. And that reassessment process, although it's been probably painful in a lot of cases, you're absolutely right that it's in a non pandemic kind of scenario. it's a good idea. It's a good practice. And so like that process of reevaluation, regardless of what what tool you're kind of assessing, it's really, really important. That's probably one of the most important things that leads again to the process of saying, hey, let's migrate away from a rip in the box to another solution. It's kind of taking a look at things and saying, all right, well, we should take a fresh look at this and see how we can do it differently. And
yeah, for sure.
I'm guessing that you guys have seen a lot of that with the companies that you interact with on all different levels.
Oh yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody's reevaluating where they're coming from. We're definitely dealing with different levels of staffing. I know as someone who has done some educating, and I get asked to write certain kinds of articles, and wrote in the UK a couple of times about that, where they're like, well, how do we take this a lower number of staff that we can get in and do the same amount of work? And I think like what we were talking about with the colorways that the production can use, it's like when we talk about automation, there's good automation out there that doesn't take away from our creative ability, that doesn't reduce the quality of what we're doing. And that's where the automation makes sense. And also efficiencies, workflow efficiencies are huge, because when you do a lot of things, especially if you've been building from a garage shop up to a larger shop, you have ensconced a bunch of stuff that you did because it worked at the time that is probably not the best standard operating procedure, and you should probably check it out. It worked because you had to, spit and baling wire, you kept the place going.
Yeah.
But at this point, when you're looking at, maybe diminished resources, maybe you have to spin back up with fewer people, or with less business on the books, it's time to know, where is the time going? What's that opportunity cost, and what do we need to do? So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'd have to agree with you on there.
Well, and I know Aaron has another question here, but
yeah.
I want to follow along here real quick and talk a little bit about, people are smaller staff, just like you're saying, reevaluating things, but people are kind of gun shy about yet another software program. So what would you say is a typical skill set required or the learning curve to add on RIP software like your RIP software?
Well, I think it depends on what you're looking at as a company. Good companies will be able to help you out with a fairly substantial piece of the installation and configuration. That's what we do.
Yeah.
So when we approach a customer, especially in a case of a conversion, they want to switch from either out of the box, like a VersaWorks or a Rasterlink, like an edge print, something that came with a printer in the box to a RIP. Or if it's from a competitor's product, we are going to help them with as much of the process as we can. So, I mean, it's an additional service, but it's a full turnkey process. So at the end of the day, when you begin using the software, we're looking at training you on the basics and the fundamentals of using the RIP on a daily basis, which is dramatically different from the setup and the configuration. So to answer your question, I think that you do have the ability as a business owner to probably pay a little bit more upfront and get the whole thing kind of configured for you, by the company that's selling it. That's the way I recommend doing it. And we always take a really kind of educationally based approach to any installation. We want to make sure that, everything behind what you're doing, not just here's what to click and here's what to do, but also why do you do that? And we do the same thing when we're offering supports. How do you walk someone through understanding how you got from A to B, so that next time you're doing it, there's an awareness of the why behind the what. So it is an inherently disruptive process. So it's a really important thing to consider, is that, if I'm diving into this thing head first, what am I really in for? And what am I in for in terms of training, like you're asking? So I'd say if you're doing your own installation and configuration and color management, there's plenty of skilled people out there that can help with that piece. If you're working with a dealer, a lot of the times the dealer, if they're selling you ink or paper or fabric, you're going to be able to get that service from the dealer. They're making money on the consumables, and sometimes the RIP is just kind of thrown in as an additional part of the transaction, and they'll set it up for you, which is great. So I'd say lean on your dealer. You can go to the RIP company directly. You can lean on your dealer. There's definitely, depending on the printer that you get, you can get a lot of the ICC profiles already done. So you can kind of use a CAN profile. There's a lot of companies that do, instructional videos and have good documentation. Like, we're pretty good in help. We just launched a new user portal, so you can log in the portal. You have interface with support. You have access to application notes and videos and all that good stuff. But really, I think it's a matter of like how much you want to invest in terms of time.
Yeah.
Right.
So really, Terry, what a lot of companies will do is they'll have one person that's their best, that they'll say, train up our guy, and then that person can then disseminate that knowledge throughout the organization, kind of vertically.
Well, and I like your comment about leaning on the dealer too, because and that's in all aspects of what we do. That your dealer out there really wants to help you, and if you reach out to them, because I talk a lot about on the production floor doing training, and hey, if you're not a trainer, call on your dealer. They'll come in and they'll talk about all these different things and train up your staff, and not everybody takes advantage of it.
Yeah, and sometimes it does require a little bit of pressure, and there's a big disparity between the quality of service, the quality of post-sale service that you're going to get from some shops.
Sure.
I think there's an increasing emphasis on the full scope service.
Yeah.
So companies now, I think they've understood the point that you're not just selling a printer, you're not just selling ink. Ultimately, you're not just selling one thing. You're kind of selling a piece of the whole process, and our responsibility to know the whole process. Like, that's one thing that's kind of happened as a result of Ergosoft being kind of known for die subs. So complicated that it's sometimes here's a problem. Well, it's the heat press, it's the paper, it's the fabric. It's all these other variables that go into it, which just by virtue of being involved, like, you have to know the whole process. And I think that's what dealers are working towards as well, is that they want to be able to help in all phases from A to Z. And then that makes, that's the kind of dealer that you want to look for, is the places that can help you, not just necessarily on their product, but they'll roll up the sleeves and take a look at, all right, well, let's back up and try to really solve this problem.
Sure.
That makes sense. I mean, I think that's one of the things that does separate people. We talked earlier about the checkboxes in the software, but part of those checkboxes are about dealers and about people who are servicing you. And you have to say, what's the community like? What's the support like? What's the documentation like? Is that going to make sense to the way we're working? And I think that's a great point. And actually, to that point, we have a couple of listener questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of people who want to ask questions about RIP and about your software in particular as well. So Todd first says, and I think you kind of touched on this, but we'll go ahead and have you answer, unequivocally. Would your RIP software be able to be used across multiple print platforms like digital print, sublimation, DTG, DTF, or would each platform need its own RIP?
Okay, so yes, to answer the question, no problem. Our product is built with a really, really wide foundation. One thing that's kind of unique probably about Ergosoft is that we never, despite being globally recognized as a die sub RIP, we never really pursued one niche within digital print. So we have bells and whistles and options and features for pretty much every digital print application out there. We do have a number of DTG features, like background color removal, where it'll recognize the blue in Terry's shirt, and anywhere where the file has that blue, it won't lay down any ink. So you're using the blue in the shirt as part of the design. All the way from features for photo and fine art applications to like rectangular nesting for signage and that kind of thing. So you would just get one product and then license out each individual printer on top of that. So that's kind of how we do it, is that you have the RIP and then you add in printers on top of that.
All right. That's cool. So yeah, that's good to hear. I mean, I figured that's kind of how it worked, but it was good to kind of like lay that out. And then actually, Aaron comes in with his own question. Speaking of die sublimation variables, he says, "How does a RIP help with the workflow of dealing with sublimation variables? Color reading tools maybe help break down the color management process with a RIP."
Wow, great question. It's a big. How much time do you have?
It's a huge question. Yeah, I know, right?
Can you put that question up again?
Yeah, let's put it back up again. This is a detailed one because we actually have a couple of things. First, he asks about sublimation variables, and then the rest of it's about breaking down the color management process. How does the RIP help with that?
Okay, so leave that up if you can.
Sure.
So in terms of dealing with sublimation variables, actually identifying and controlling variables is one thing that we preach constantly. That's part of when we're looking at troubleshooting a color issue with a customer. One of the first things that we ask is, all right, well, what changed? Like something probably changed. What was it? Oh, nothing changed.
Yeah.
It's okay. Then the detective work begins, which is really enjoyable. It's a fun process. So one way that you can reduce and control variables in the RIP is by, for example, using the linearization tool. So what that's going to do is it's going to identify what 100% of your channel is. So you have 4 channels, you have CMYK, and you say, all right, well, when that printer asks for 100% one of those channels, here's what it's going to look like. And you can use a spectrophotometer to read that in. So the RIP remembers that.
Okay.
Now, over the course of time, things change. You have like minute changes in the head voltage or humidity getting into your transfer paper.
Mm-hmm.
And, whatever it may be. Over the course of time, your printer could begin to drift. So we have a tool for, it's a quality control tool. But essentially what it does is you print out a chart, you scan that chart, and that chart will compare the existing reading to your original calibrated reading.
Wow.
And if you're off, you take your handy Spectro, this is a X-Rite i1 Pro 3. So pretty small device. Yeah. This one in particular has an 8mm measurement aperture, which is very good for textile applications. Textile having a contoured feature, you want the largest possible measurement lens to get the most accurate reading. So Barbieri is another brand that's like the Cadillac of spectrophotometers, but you would use that device to then restore your machine to its original state. So you would call that re-linearizing the printer. So that's one way of dealing with variables and sublimation. So over the course of time, things are going to change. So you take a Spectro and you relin the machine to get it back into that original condition. So that's, something that we always recommend is, invest in a Spectro. That thing is, we sell these babies. It's like $1,700. The cheapest Barbieri that you're going to get, which is a phenomenal device, is about $5,000.
Wow.
And if you're a larger shop and you can afford that, I would definitely, you can weigh your options, but it's for the cost of entry, it's no longer a very expensive kind of barrier. Whereas, prior to the advent of this 8mm aperture, it was a fairly expensive endeavor to get your feet wet on owning a Spectro. So that's one thing that's really important is, the thing I left out is if you do own a Spectro, you're going to be able to profile your machine to begin with. And in sublimation, each printing system is totally unique. There's no 2 sublimation systems are ever the same. You can have identical everything, and there's going to be some variation between those 2. So really getting everything to be perfectly calibrated to it as its own little self-contained unit, the Spectro is kind of the beginning of that, is that you're able to characterize all the combination of all those different pieces. And then once you have that characterized, then you could go back and you can always kind of restore it to that original state. So let's see. That's one way. I think another way of dealing with sublimation variables is that's the color QPC is our quality module.
Yeah.
That's probably, I would say, one of the best tools, largely to do with calibration, a lot to do with spot colors. If you're doing anything with spot colors, the thing with spot colors is you are basically avoiding a translation. So you get a file and you have a color value, and instead of having that translation take place, it goes right to the CMYK number. So if your system is off at all, and it spits out that CMYK number, it's going to be slightly different. So a lot of it has to do with measurement, and that largely starts with the spectro. But
I'll say that's
the most precise I can answer that question.
Compared to the kind of work that I've done, I know anybody like me who's like an embroiderer who's done some desktop sub. Yeah, we're talking like matching by eye with color chips and printing out a register of colors on every garment you touch, and the idea of actually being able to measure accurately and bring it back in is a whole different thing, handled by the RIP. So that's really cool. I think that not everybody really thinks about that, especially when you're talking about RIPs. They're just thinking about literally, as you said before, dots on the page. We're just getting dots out. But the ability to actually measure, use a spectra, that's really cool. And Aaron also says, thanks for answering all that great info. So good to know that he had something to get out of that. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that we don't think about color management in that way sometimes. Some of us who are doing print, I think do, but I think increasingly, at least for me, I'm seeing people in the sublimation world that were from, like I said, from embroidery, from vinyl, from somewhere else where maybe the concept of color matching was not as controlled as that. So it's interesting to kind of hear more.
Well, sublimation has really blown up. And to your point, I think what we're seeing is a lot of companies are getting their feet wet with sublimation. HP made a sublimation printer with a thermal head, which is pretty mind-boggling if you know how sublimation ink works. Achieving that with a thermal head was pretty cool.
Yeah.
But to your point, we're seeing a lot of that. A lot of companies that are emerging with, this crazy demand for sublimated products is just getting a lot of new players into the market, and with that comes this huge curve. It's a massive learning curve.
Well, especially you've got people who are starting out in this, like we said, like this desktop world, this craft style world. And then when they do move from that to production, they're looking at a very different level of I think, process, or at least they can be. Like you said, as you grow with it, and as you go to maybe more professional equipment, you may have some of these questions about how to handle these things. And especially when you're doing one-offs, it's a lot different than when you start doing corporate work, or when you do have to match colors from job to job. It's a big deal.
Yeah, and I think it forces you to have a lot more ownership over the process.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we're getting down to the end of our hour. Chris,
Yes.
How can our listeners find you? How can they reach out to you?
So you can find our contact information at our website. So ergosoft.net has a few different emails depending on where you're located on the globe. We are a global company, so our headquarters is in Altnau, Switzerland, but we have a couple branches around Europe. Of course, here in the U.S., we also have a team in Latin America, handling everything from Brazil up through Mexico. So all the contact information is on the website, and that should be enough to get you pointed in the right direction.
Right on. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on and explaining all this stuff. I mean, this is something like, I think it's a little mysterious to people. It's a little bit of a black box. So it's kind of cool to get to open that up and explain some of the value that's there.
Well, I hope it's been partially demystified as opposed to more confused.
Well, don't go anywhere, Chris, because you volunteered to do 5 things for us today. So
yes,
I'll
indeed.
let Eric take over there.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into 5 things. Everybody loves the intro, so we'll play on. All right. And with that, here's Chris's 5 things.
Okay. My 5 things to do every day. First, say I love you. probably one of the most underrated things that you can do for people in your life, special people, friends, family members, loved ones. Make sure you say it. And when you say it, make it sound like you mean it. It's very, very, it can go a long way. Second, meditate. Take 20 minutes out of your day, control your breathing, and focus your mind on, the positive things that you want to try and achieve or change that you want to see in your life, in the world. I think that's a really nice way to kind of get recentered and to get refocused on what matters and what's important. A lot of people get a little, I haven't ever done it. Don't worry about it. Just give it a try. You'll be fine. Number 3, pick up the phone. Give somebody a call. In business, it's essential. But also in your personal life, it's really, really important. So whether it's a business call, a personal call, it goes a long way. Pick up the phone, make that phone call, even if you're not in the mood. It's going to be a positive result at the end. Number 4, exercise. That's going to fuel the things on the rest of the list. If you exercise, you're going to feel good. Again, it doesn't take too long. 20 minutes, half hour, get the blood moving, you're going to feel better. And then finally, improve the space around you. I stole this one from my wife, and I think she stole it from the Girl Scouts. But no matter where you are or what you're doing, try to find one way to improve the space around you. I think you can do that in a lot of different ways. Pick up a piece of litter, smile at somebody, something that just improves where you are. It's another one of those things that you'd be shocked at if you do something like that on a regular basis, how much of a difference it will make. So
I love that. Those are great things. I mean, everybody always thinks like the 5 things has got to be 5 production tips, 5, and like as much as we love those and we welcome those, I love to hear people talking about, the way we live, because hey guys, this is our lives here. I know it's also all the work we do, but every single day, it's something I talk about when we talk about pricing. I'm like, when you're working, no matter what you're doing, these are the precious minutes of your life that don't come back. So, make them good and make life around you good. So thank you, Chris, for that. That was an excellent 5 things.
All right.
Thanks for coming on today, Chris. Really appreciate it. Great show.
I had a great time, guys. Thank you very much for having me on.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Good episode, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Very interesting stuff. And I see Cindy says they're great show. Thank you, with lots of exclamation marks. And Aaron commented, great 5 things. So let's talk a little bit about what we have coming up and get out of here close to on time. Look at us. All right. Well, I'm going to be on Screen Printing Magazine's Screensaver podcast on Tuesday. Awesome. That's next week on June 1st. I'm going to be with editor and host Adrian Palmer and industry veterans Jeff Baxter and Marshall Atkinson. We're going to be talking about when is it time to add DTG to your screen printing business. Thursday, June 3rd, I'll be joining Jay Bassell and Jeff Morgenthaler for the Equipment Zone webinar on DTG Printing Index. This is the final episode of a 5-part series. We'll be talking about proper DTG curing, and you can sign up for that at equipmentzone.com. It is a free webinar. My complete screen printing business course in Phoenix, Workhorse Products, it'll be July 10th through 11th. I will tell you, all these classes, as we were talking about at the top of the show, everybody's wanting to get out there. These sell out. The last my show I did, or my class I did in Atlas Screen Supply in Chicago, sold out 2 months before the event. So the next Atlas class, by the way, will be in Chicago, will be August 21st and 22nd. You can find all my upcoming events at terrycombs.com under the tab Tour Dates. Aaron is going to be heading out and representing our success group at the Applique Getaway, July 23rd through 25th. He's going to be teaching 2 classes on Friday the 23rd. I'm translating these because this is him saying it. There's a lot of I'm doing this. He's on Friday the 23rd. He's going to be teaching going from hobby to business, 5 keys to success. And on Saturday the 24th, he'll be teaching Conquer Fear and Live to Tell About It. And to sign up and for more information on this live in-person event, as well as virtual options, go to appliquegetaway.com. And the greatest name for an event of all time. So you should just go because of that. And let's see here. Coming up at 11:30, catch the half with Aaron and Eric. And in parentheses, he says, "I think I should be able to be there." It looks like he's back.
Here's hoping. Like I said, it can always be the quarter. I can host this by myself if I have to.
Or the nickel.
Never know.
So you tune into that at liveosg.com. Or on Eric's YouTube, and let's see, at facebook.com/Our Success Group Pro. Yes. And coming soon with a website where you can get details and past episodes of the half. How about you, Eric?
Today I have my usual 2:30 show on the Take Up. I had a little looks like we had a little hiccup in my posting schedule, so it turned out where something didn't post when it should. I will be getting that information up for everybody. But yeah, 2:30 today, Mountain Time, the only time that matters for me, at least. We're going to have another in my design breakdown series. I'm going to break down my approach to a recent design that I did and answer some questions I've had through the week. So a little bit of design analysis today, a little bit of digitizing and art analysis going on today. So go over to ericcampbell.com and the tab at the top labeled the Take Up. The latest episode is always there, as well as the listing of all the episodes you can find on my YouTube channel. And so if you're someone who has YouTube Premium, likes to listen while they work, or be able to do that, you can do it on YouTube, as well as checking me out here on Facebook. And as we announced in the news session, remember, tomorrow is the big day. I know I'm sweating. Big day for my next big webinar, Understanding Emblems, Digitizing Production, and Patch Styles. So we're going to be handling that tomorrow. Talking about making your patches, talking about digitizing the matter within the patch as well as the borders, talking about all different processes and how to sell and market these things and where they fit into your overall lookout. And that's going to be at decorators.education. So check that out there. The other thing, I'm just going to go ahead and actually give you guys titles. We have titles now, and we have postings up for the live shows. If you go to the DAX shows, so daxshow.com, you'll see that I'm teaching Elevate Your Embroidery Digitizing. So I'm bringing back a course people really loved with some updates, and that's happening at Kansas City, Minnesota, and Chicagoland. So be ready for that, daxshow.com, and that is a live event. Still, cross your fingers, folks. It's a live event. We'll hopefully be able to do it, but it looks good so far. And also, I'm signing the contracts today for Impressions Expo Fort Worth. So I'll be teaching specialty thread, design, digitizing, and marketing. And I'll appear with friend of the show, Jeff Fuller from Embroidery Nerd and from Fuller Embroidery Works on the Elements of Excellent Embroidery panel hosted by Madeira USA. So go to impressionsexpo.com, and yeah, we're on the road again. It's happening.
You sound like a busy guy, Eric. I'm just saying.
I feel like a busy guy, Terry. I mean, like, you don't know. I'm sure Terry's book of travel, we have blown the dust off. I'm sure you've broken the spine open on that sucker now. It's time to hit it.
It is no longer Terry's book of good intentions. It is now back to Terry's book of travel. So.
And by the way, you have to bring this on. And since we're actually coming in just over the hour, not into severe bonus time, Aaron says, so you're saying it's me that makes the show really long, Terry?
I'm feeling like yes.
Hey, you're not here, so we got to take our shots when we can, my friend. And he did say, I did try, by the way, with my long, complicated question, and you almost did it too. You almost got it, buddy. All right. Well, with that, we have come to the close of another show. We have to thank Chris Debian for being with us today. He didn't criticize my way I pronounce his name, so it must have been all right.
Must have been right.
Must have been all right.
Can you imagine the way he's heard it before? I mean, it's.
Oh no, I'm sure the Des Beans has happened to him, and I feel real bad. I mean, coming from E-Rich, I feel for his Des Beans days. I'm sure they're pretty bad. So, Debian, I'm going to make sure I hit that really, really well if I can.
Awesome. All right. Well, we also want to thank you, Eric, for coming on and being live with us today, and also doing all the things you do behind the scenes as well. I just sit here and talk, and so.
Yeah, if I look like I'm looking all over the place and I look a little scattered, yeah, I'm still pushing the buttons, folks.
Hey, we also want to say to all of our listeners here in the U.S., have a wonderful Memorial Day holiday. Remember what it's all about, and let's appreciate all the servicemen and women who have gone before and made the ultimate sacrifice.
Absolutely. And next week, Terry and Aaron will both be back talking about time management tips. And I don't know about you guys. I love the host shows. I love when we have both Terry and Aaron on talking a topic. It's like old school days like we used to be. And time management tips are something we all need. I know, as Terry pointed out, I desperately need better time management tips. Time management tips, personal boundaries, something. I need one of those. Suffice it to say, next week should be an awesome show. And I'm very much looking forward to listening to that while I produce.
All right. Until then, I am Terry Combs. He's Eric Campbell, sitting in for Aaron Montgomery.
And at least for today, we are the two regular guys.
Here we go. We're out.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to Two Regular Guys. Check out our website at tworegularguys.com. That's the number 2, regularguys.com. You can also interact with us over at our Facebook page, facebook.com/tworegularguys, or send us a tweet, twitter.com/tworegularguys. And we have a YouTube page. You can find all that from our website, tworegularguys.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to spending some time with you again next week.